fail on this, folks, Elizabeth Warren is right. We're going to get single-payer health care. If they fail and this whole thing comes crashing down, they're going to use it to push socialized medicine. Let's go back to what's going on with these voter rolls. And we got Terry McAuliffe again, a guy who has been campaign manager for the Clintons. He was their handpicked head of the DNC at one point in time. And he's got some issues going back to this last year as well. Well, at the same time, remember current acting director Andrew McCabe. His wife was running for Senate in Virginia. At the same time that McCabe was investigating Hillary Clinton's emails and investigating issues related to Terry McAuliffe was holding fundraisers and political things for Andrew McCabe's wife, a clear violation of protocol of ethics, and gave her a $700,000 donation. This is something that needs to be looked at. We have investigations, multiple investigations that reported last week. Circa has been doing a lot of research into this. And as they pointed out, there are 3 different investigations that are going on with Andrew McCabe, and one of them involves Terry McAuliffe intricately. And he has no intention, however, of turning over publicly available voter data. And again, as the Trump administration says, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Well, I think they may be afraid of us finding out that Jay Johnson and Homeland Security tried to insinuate themselves into the election system, among other things. I think we need to be very afraid of this entire electronic voting system. We've pointed out here in Texas, we've done reports on this. We tried to talk to the director of elections here in Texas. He stonewalled us when we went to his office. We wanted to ask him because what this guy had done after coming to Texas government straight from the Rose law firm where Hillary Clinton used to hang out, what he did was he started removing the ability for us to have images that would give us an audit capability of votes. See, it's in the Texas Constitution as well as the law that every ballot needs to be numbered. This is something that went back to when we had paper ballots. And this is not just a problem in Texas. The major voting machine vendors that we're using here, one of them has no capability whatsoever to store images of the ballots, so you can't audit these ballots after the voting. So that's a different issue than voter registration rolls, but it is all tied together. They have a lot of different ways that they rigged the elections. As I mentioned before, the idea that you wouldn't have any voter ID, that you would have an extended voting period, that you could vote anywhere that you wanted to, all these motor voter bills, these are all things that the Democrats have been pushing for decades, pushing so that they could vote early, vote often, and enable fraud, because what they've done is they have removed the mechanisms that would allow us to have a legitimate control over who the actual voters are. A U.S. warship that has been patrolling close to the artificial islands that China has created in the close to the Philippines, and has fortified, and so we have a U.S. warship that's there. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then they've been buzzed by some airplanes there, and of course Donald Trump has said that he is at the end of his strategic patience. He's going to be talking again to the Prime Minister of Japan and the President of China later today. And before we get back to the news, and before we get back to this voter fraud and investigations into who real voters are, and if we had fraudulent voters that were voting in the election, I want to remind you that we have our 4th of July Summer Mega Special now live at InfoWarsStore.com. Free shipping store-wide on everything in the store, and a wide variety of products that have been put on massive discounts. 30% off things like Brain Force Plus, Super Male Vitality, Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, Z-Shield. 30 to 40% off InfoWars Select storable food. And remember, free shipping. That's a heavy item, so that's a big savings to get free shipping. And 30 to 40% off InfoWars Select storable food, non-GMO, made in America, storable for 25 years. And once you open it, you can reseal it for short-term use. Also, Emmerich's Essentials, our outdoor pack. That is 40% off retail. And Living Defense, 20% off. Remember, store-wide, free shipping on everything, massive discounts from 30 to 40% off selected products, all now part of our 4th of July Summer Mega Special at InfoWarsStore.com. And we really do appreciate your support. That is how we fund our operation. You remember when Megyn Kelly was interviewing Alex Jones and J.P. Morgan pulled their support of NBC and so forth. You know, they're not going to, J.P. Morgan and other people that are involved with the Federal Reserve and Big Pharma, they're never going to support an independent operation like InfoWars. That's why we put together a win-win situation, or as Alex Jones puts it, a 360-win situation, offering you high-quality, natural products that really work, that are very effective at the very best price you're going to find anywhere. And that's how we fund our operation, going direct to you, so we don't have to go to the type of people that want to fund NBC and Megyn Kelly. Let's go back to this issue of voter fraud. And as I pointed out before, remember, there's two things going on here. There's voting machine fraud, which they tried to imply by saying the Russians were hacking our election. They use that term, but then when you push them on it, they would deny and say, no, they didn't get into any voting machines. They didn't touch any votes or anything like that. No, the hacking was because they were saying that they had released through WikiLeaks true information about Hillary Clinton that caused people to not want to vote for her. And that's really what happened, except that it wasn't a hack. It was people internal in the DNC, we believe, based on WikiLeaks, who they've told us the truth about all of this. And we've had multiple times that they've said it's not a state actor that turned this information over. We had another individual, a former UK ambassador, said, I came to the United States to get that information. I was handed it by a disgruntled Bernie Sanders supporter who knew that the DNC had hacked the election against Bernie Sanders. They had pulled every trick they could, colluded with the press, so forth and so on, to make sure that they got that. And then I believe, and we've got multiple evidence of it, the Democrats worked with the politicized Obama administration, the politicized intelligence and law enforcement agencies, to collude with them, to collude with the press, to put out false information about Donald Trump, to spy on the Trump officials to see if they could get dirt on them, violating the law in the process. And this is not a supposition. This is something that came out of the FISA court. And they normally classify their decisions. And they released this decision to say that the NSA and the FBI had violated the law by spying on American citizens in America. Now you've got them saying, we want a reauthorization of the 702 part of the Patriot Act that allows us to collect information on people with a couple of different hops. And you got people like Lindsey Graham saying, but did you spy on me? How do I know if you spied on me? Will you tell me? And they said, no, we can't tell you, Senator. If we did that, we would have to violate your security or your privacy in order to tell you that we had violated your privacy. And it's almost like saying, well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. If I told you that I'd spied on you, I'd have to kill your privacy. So I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to give you that information, Senator. I just want you to reauthorize this and to make it permanent so we don't have to come back and do this again. Now, maybe they got enough information on Lindsey Graham that they can force him to do that. I hope they don't, because it's only going to get worse if we don't put an end to this politicized surveillance state that is operating for itself. But let's move now from the phony issues. And again, these phony issues about the hacking of the election, that was something that was being put out there by Hillary Clinton, being put out there by Jay Johnson and everything back in October. Remember, we had Jay Johnson when he finally said, I'll talk to you now, finally, about breaking in illegally into state boards of elections. He goes before Congress and he says, yeah, Jim Clapper and I made the statement on October 7th, and I'm glad we did, frankly, to say that the Russians were hacking our elections. Now, when he said that on October 7th, he was getting himself involved in the election in a way that was a violation of the Hatch Act. And remember, going back to about that same amount of time, October 31st, CNN was saying, what is the Hatch Act? Did James Comey break it? And Harry Reid said, yeah, I think he did. Well, what is the Hatch Act? The Hatch Act is something that was passed in 1939. Congress wanted to make sure that federal employees were not going to be supporting candidates in congressional elections. They restricted the ability of federal employees to engage in political campaign activities. This is why Andrew McCabe, current acting director of the FBI, is in trouble, because he campaigned as an FBI agent for his wife, and also for and he was investigating the guy, Terry McAuliffe, who gave $700,000. This governor of Virginia was being investigated along with Hillary Clinton, and he gave $700,000 in a campaign contribution to McCabe's wife when she's running for Senate. I mean, these are multiple ethics violations, legal violations, Hatch Act. The only question is, will the Trump administration call him on it? And here's what the Hatch Act says. They cannot use their official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the result of an election. And as they point out, the law doesn't require that the employee's wrongful conduct actually interfere with or affect the result of an election. It's just something that could possibly do that. So that's a key part of this to keep in mind when we look at the fact that Terry McAuliffe does not want to turn over this publicly available data to help us look at the voter registration rolls. And that goes back to this story. Remember, this is something that goes back to November 14th. It was one of the earliest times that we talked about it. Report, 3 million votes cast in the presidential election by illegal aliens. And this was based on something, we didn't make this up at InfoWars. Mainstream media acted as if we did, but it came from Greg Phillips of votefraud.org. Yeah, what is Terry McAuliffe and these other Democrats trying to hide? We found out just on June 26th that we have a student who is heading to prison for registering dead voters for Democrats. When that information came out, Donald Trump Jr. tweeted, ding, 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 look, we got one. I thought this didn't happen. This is a guy who was working for Harrisonburg Votes, and this was an organization that was affiliated with the Democrat Party. And I remember when this first happened, he's now pled guilty. He's going to go to jail for a prison sentence of 100 to 120 days. The reason this was discovered was because the person who was processing the information happened to recognize a couple of the names on the voter rolls or people who had worked that had worked with in government who were deceased. I said, wait a minute. I know that guy. He's dead. Just like I said about my the friend of my brother-in-law's who went to vote, and they said in North Carolina, oh, I'm sorry, your dead mother has voted, and so have you, as a matter of fact. Well, this stuff doesn't happen, does it? Well, this guy's going to prison in Virginia, where Terry McAuliffe is governor. And this goes back, this is something that the mainstream media has really hammered Donald Trump and used InfoWars to hammer him with, saying, oh, that's a lie. That's absolutely a lie. There wasn't any fake voting going on whatsoever. And yet they refuse to turn over public information. Publicly, they're stonewalling with this. They said, we don't want to legitimize this. In other words, we don't want to find out if it's true. We don't want to find that out. Going back to November 14th, if you remember, we had this report from votefraud.org. It was Greg Phillips who tweeted out. He was the president of that organization. He said, we verified more than 3 million votes cast by non-citizens. We're joining True the Vote to initiate legal action. They want to find out if it's going on. Why wouldn't Democrats want to have honest elections? Rhetorical question there. Okay. Then a couple of weeks later, the mainstream media comes out because Donald Trump says, I won the popular vote if illegal voters excluded. And they went ballistic. They said, look, he's getting that from InfoWars. We were just reporting what Vote Fraud and True the Vote were saying. They said, hey, we looked at this and we saw 3 million votes cast by non-citizens, and we're going to initiate legal action. We reported that. Then Donald Trump says, I won if the popular vote, if illegal voters are excluded. And then they come out and say, that's a lie. New York Times. We spent the first hour of the show talking about the New York Times and how they've had to pull back their false idea of 17 intelligence agencies. They've unanimously said there was Russian involvement in our election and so forth. 3,500 stories about that as of May. And they've still been pushing this along. So AP and the New York Times had to pull that back. New York Times didn't even their retraction was a lie. Even their retraction was wrong. There weren't even 3 agencies who did it. It was a panel, as I pointed out before, a panel of people that were handpicked. They present them with a report and then essentially defy them to object to it. And then when they don't object to it, then James Clapper says, well, that's it. We have a unanimous agreement here. And it's just the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA. So he speaks for all 17 agencies, and he's putting this out. This is the narrative that was started by Hillary Clinton back in the October debate that was mocked by WikiLeaks as being patently absurd. But that doesn't stop them. So the New York Times, who does that, the New York Times was called out as fake news for a story that they put out February the 14th. And then when James Comey testified at the beginning of June, he said, no, that wasn't true at all. So over and over again, they got a great record, but they